Let's talk about something really important today. It's this idea that maybe, just maybe, the most difficult parts of your life weren't actually mistakes. What if they were the very things that built you?
You know that feeling? When you look back and your life doesn't feel like this beautiful, coherent story. Instead, it just feels like a highlight reel of, well, random, painful moments. A series of things you wish had gone differently that don't really seem to add up to anything meaningful at all.
And we tend to label these moments failures. Things like a major illness, a sudden job loss, a really painful divorce, a period of total burnout. We see them as proof that something is wrong with us. And we get stuck asking, why did this happen to me? But what if there's a much more powerful question? What if we asked, what was being built in me when this happened? Because, man, the cost of seeing our lives this way is just huge. We start to build our whole identity around the damage. We tell ourselves these stories, right? I'm broken, I'm not enough. And that narrative is so painful that a lot of the time we just check out. We start living on autopilot just to keep from feeling the sting of all those so-called failures.
Okay, but here it is. Here is the big pivot. What if all of those moments weren't about destruction at all? What if they were actually about architecture? What if your story isn't a record of everything that's been torn down, but is actually the blueprint for what's been built?
There's actually a name for this, a structural shift. Now, just think about that for a second. It's a turning point that cracks an old part of you, not to break you, but to make space for a new capacity to be born. These aren't just endings. They are literally the foundational moments that build something completely new inside of you.
So how do we do this? How do we start reading our own life's blueprints instead of just getting stuck staring at the cracks? It's a pretty simple three-step process. First, think of 3 to 5 of those big turning points in your life. Then, for each one, you're going to ask 2 really powerful questions. What cracked? And what was born?
And this is how your whole story can completely change. The old story, it's just a dead end. My business failed, period. But the new blueprint, now that tells a much richer story. What cracked? My belief that my worth was tied to how productive I was. And what was born? The capacity to actually rest and value myself beyond my work. Do you see the difference? It's huge. One is a story of failure, the other is a story of profound growth.
Now, looking at your story this way, it does require a few things from us. It's a practice in curiosity, just being willing to ask, what if this was data, not a defect? It definitely takes courage to revisit some of these scenes. And it requires a ton of patience and self-compassion to do this work without judging who we used to be.
I just love this metaphor. Your story is a structure under renovation, not a condemned building. It's not about tearing down the past. It's about seeing how every single experience, especially the really hard ones, was used to renovate, improve, and strengthen the person you are today.
So here's what I want you to take away today. Just this one question for you to reflect on. Which turning point in my life is asking to be seen differently? You don't have to figure out your whole life story right now. Just pick one. One moment that you might be able to look at not as a failure, but as part of the blueprint.
And as you sit with that question, here's a really gentle tool you can use. On a scale from 0 to 5, where 0 is I'm totally avoiding this, and 5 is I'm showing up fully, just gently notice where you are with your engagement, vulnerability, bravery, and curiosity. Remember, this isn't a grade. It's not a test. It's just a kind way to check in with yourself right here today. So, let's close with this powerful thought. May I have the courage to revisit my turning points not as evidence against me, but as blueprints of the strength I now carry. May you see your story not as a list of your faults, but as the very blueprint that built the strength, the resilience, and the wisdom that you carry with you today.